Sorry, we got interrupted. We're in a hotel. Something false alarm or something. So yeah, they someone rang the fire bell. Um, the thing is, I would just to pick up where we left off. Pick up where we left off. But this is part two. If you haven't seen that. Okay, so here's what we said: is we're talking about India, we're talking about our country, and we're talking about different ways in which people, that would just jump in. When we look out at, like, when we see our country, like when we see the country, like, I mean, and we think of, like, people are aware and have some highly sensitive, devote their lives to just do almost like moderating them, just about, giving themselves to wake up people about this. And then on the opposite extreme, you have people who are sort of like, what? Okay, but it doesn't matter, because the thing is this: when they're talking about, like, say, the corporation sort of, what happened in my lifetime. So that is to say, if you were born, if you're younger than I, it would appear that, like, that you're living in, this is like you're in a capitalist country, and this is capitalism you're living in, right? Because, right, why would it be? It's certainly not in any textbooks. I mean, there are no textbooks on economic history in the universities. I mean, a matter of fact, politics and economics and history are three separate departments. You're not allowed to know that, like, there exists, that things are integrated into one another. Like, you study them separately. But so it's not. It's a bit. But no matter what was going on, a person younger than myself, like, wouldn't perceive that anything unusual was happening, other than, like, we live in a capitalist country. The reorganization. People have often said that the one reason, that it's probably the one reason that a lot of movements that were, like, entirely centered on the concept, like, that, you would overthrow capitalism. The one they said, well, Soviets and everything. Well, one reason they failed is that they did not realize how dynamic capitalism is, like, that it was dynamic, that it would adjust, all the things that were claimed to have been, foreseen as, like, this will be when, it'll fall, or it'll this or that. They didn't, at different times in the 19th century, that predicted that eventually capitalism was going to collapse, and then this will happen. He said, people do say they didn't realize what a dynamic, elastic form it was, and, like, it, could be reorganized. Okay, but it never, in the history of modern industrial capitalism, was it reorganized in the way it was in the past 30 years. And what that's creating for the planet, for our planet that we live on, is that while at one point, it's created two things with regard to the planet that are new. One is that, unlike that, like I said, unlike the, the sort of image of, the factory with these smokestacks that, churns out smoke into the thing and dumps, something dirty into the water, and then you want to say it's called dirty factory or something. Something new. It is some kind of new form of capital formation, deeply integrated into the state, subsidized by us through the state, couldn't exist without it, is so large in scope that the fact that it's based, part of it is based here, most of its offices are like Brussels and Geneva, it's in strategic alliance with other foreign capital formations, and it's state subsidized, and it's in the agro sector. Okay, that's number one. The birth of these kind of, like, unfamiliar formations that do resemble what the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union didn't have the genius to perfect it that way. They had in their time. They were moving from an agrarian society into an industrialized society, and they sort of like they wanted to do something like that. They wanted that in each sector, but with limited awareness at that time, not even being an industrialized country, the best they could come up with would be that the state would sort of be the provider. The state would sort of go into, it would be the state itself, right? They weren't as advanced to have the idea that the state can operate, that you can monopolize a sector and it can be integrated with the state, but then the public will subsidize it. It's under state control, but it's also private in the sense that it's run by people who know what they're doing with regard to how they know what they're doing. But I mean, a much more sophisticated version of what the Soviet Union wanted. We have, and particularly in the agro sector. Now, here's the thing. While at the same time, like the kind of things that such an entity like is able to do, or to what kinds of things it's doing with damage to the planet, that in and of the kind of harm it could cause, something like that can cause, because it is so far that anyone would have imagined, who was like, I don't know, like an environmentalist or something in the 70s, or someone who's oriented towards worrying about like cutting down trees, like could never have imagined something like this thing, like that, what it's capable of, and what in terms of like destroying the earth, but like and in a way that like that means that like we're all gonna die. But also the reorganization of capitalism along these particular lines that, as I said, involve a total prejudice to financial capital, an abandonment of the physical economy, and the removal of controls on capital movements in and out of the country, so much so, as we said in the other, that 90% of the capital that moves in international exchanges is unrelated to the physical economy of any country. Okay, because of that, though, and everything that's physical being shut down, including the what's essentially, for those who care about such things, the gutting of NASA. What's ended up happening is that while you have two things simultaneously, some new kind of capital formation, of which there are many, that's capable of doing things that are going to be we're all going to die, but also by shutting down all the drivers for the sectors that integrate science into economics, the high-tech sector, NASA, the Pentagon system, these things that are the mechanism for the high-tech sector, that the developments necessary to, say, for example, reforest. Like you're cutting down all the forest, which you're going to want to reforest. We don't know how to do that. Or energy that is not, a form of energy that's not, that's legitimately clean energy, that's inexhaustible. That is to say, something we're unaware of as of yet. Your car goes faster on it. You know what I mean? This isn't, like, where you gotta give up, plug your car into your, toaster and it will go really slowly, but it'll be good for the environment. No. The, like, actual new kinds of, clean sources of energy that are limitless and free the country from any obligations to be, dealing with, certain kinds of governments, because that's where the oil is, and then all the problems with that. No, like inexhaustible sources of energy for this, like these kind of things that are both like clean and about nature and about reforesting and are sort of biological in nature, but would be developed by the same mechanisms that it's a form of technology. It sort of like it has all kinds of natural capabilities. One reason people are very interested in looking into colonizing Mars. It's not because they want to live on Mars, but because when NASA takes up something like how do we colonize Mars, right? First they have to figure out how to get there. All kinds of high-tech things come out of that can be then handed over to the private sector and put into civilian use for the population. But also when you colonize a planet that at this point is barren, the amount of things that would be developed in terms of how to, for example, reforest, how to create a natural ecosystem on Mars. How do you do that? That's a technology, but it's biological in nature, but it's a technology. But all of that takes place in physical parts of the economy, the Pentagon system and NASA, and then there's the physical part of the economy that puts it into place in infrastructure and so forth. I mean, all of those things are shut down. They're shut down. It's the active economy is that also happens to be driving us into like a sort of permanent low growth situation. I mean, that has made it so that we simultaneously are seeing a destruction of our planet and all the mechanisms needed to move to the next wave of development. Do you call it technology when it's natural in nature? I don't know, but that technology, that thing. No, any innovation in how to bring that sort of thing, which would just be under the heading of green technology, no, that innovation itself is shut down. So you have the planet is dying by way of like an intentional death by these capital formations, but there's no replacement for such. There's no green technology ever. It doesn't seem to ever arrive. It won't arrive except in people's fantasies, because all of the physical, structural mechanisms of the economy are shut down because the economy takes place in virtual space. Do you know the return time on investment now is sometimes a matter of minutes? Minutes. That's the return time on investment. Money's moving that fast in a virtual sector unrelated to the physical economy. All of this is part of the reason our planet is dying.